You're listening to the Mashup Americans.
Hey, I'm Amy Choi.
And I'm Rebecca Lair, and we are the Mashup Americans.
Rebecca?
Yeah?
You live with many generations of your family around you. Like vertical, up and down, horizontal. Northeast Los Angeles is actually like Lair Angeles.
That is correct. I'm nodding very hard. True.
You know, and it's like one of the great delights of my life has been falling in love with you and your family and with LA. I'm not going to say your husband, Neil, because I was in love with him before. But the way that you have so many layers of family and being in your home is like everybody's coming in and out. And like there's always, you know, oftentimes dogs that are not your dog that are in your house.
I
It's
know.
just like...
Rest in peace, Lola. Rest in peace.
Oh, Lola. She really had a good life. She really did.
She really did.
But like I know your parents' dog and like I knew her whole sickness story.
Yes.
Just the fact that I have been adopted in and we've kind of all adopted each other. Your parents have adopted me. Like every time your dad meets a new Korean person, he texts me because he's excited.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
which is often.
It's not infrequent how often Michael texts me about a new Korean thing that he's learned. But like what...
He is a kimchiologist.
He really is. Oh, God, Michael. Love him so much. Mia, love you too. But I think your family does it with so much grace. And it's also not easy. As somebody who does not have that, like I'm really close with my cousins, but those are relationships that I really worked hard on as an adult. I'm close with my sister, but my parents are far away. There's like, you know, a lot of shit going on with like intergenerational stuff. Having that interconnectedness that you have with your family, it doesn't come without a lot of work and also hard. It's hard. And I think still that's one of our ultimate rules for living a beautiful life is embracing the complexity of interconnectedness and doing the work to allow that to bloom.
Absolutely.
It's hard and beautiful. And like that's also maybe one of the mantras of a mashup life.
Absolutely. How do you act with grace? How do you process all those things? It's so beautiful. And I'm, really lucky to be part of a Jewish community that I really love. And our rabbi, Susan Goldberg, gave a really beautiful sermon this year during the high holidays about interconnectedness and really how interdependent we all are. And one of the things she said that really, she really pointed out it's hard too. Like sometimes it's really easy to just be kind and sometimes it's really hard.
Sometimes people are assholes. That's a fact.
But being in community is the work, is what life is made up of. And it's also, one of the things she said was, we are not individuals, we're actually generations. And that she wished for all of us to experience the deep hope of our interconnectedness. And so that is something that I'm really taking to heart this year, is this idea of the hopefulness of what it really feels like to be human, which is needing each other.
That is so beautiful. And we have learned so much about healing through generations from our guest today, our friend, the legend, Lisa Ling.
Lisa Ling. Lisa Ling is a journalist. You have seen her on CBS, CNN. She has so many shows of her own. She's done everything from embedding with notorious biker clubs to covering the LRA in Uganda to the humanitarian crisis in North Korea to hosting daytime talk show with her stint on The View.
She's so amazing.
She truly is. And she has transformed her relationship with her family through so much healing and plant medicine in a way that has opened up her life to living with her
Korean mother-in-law,
her own mom, her sister-in-law, and just squeezing all the love and life out of the chaos that interconnectedness brings.
Total inspo for me personally, for everybody, and we are in awe, and we're so excited to have her here today.
Here's Lisa. Okay, Lisa.
Okay.
Here we are. So, Lisa Ling, how do you mash up?
How do I mash up? I feel like that is a perfect way to characterize my entire life. Even on the way over here, I am thinking about so many different aspects of my life. I mean, in 1 week, I went from this black tie gala where Oprah and Leonardo DiCaprio and Nicole Kidman and Kim Kardashian were in attendance. And then the next day, I'm back at my home in LA, and my kids are coming into my bed, unable to sleep at 4 a.m, and I'm stressed out. I'm trying to clean up all the laundry that is strewn all over the place.
And you're like, how did this just get here?
Yeah.
It wasn't here 12 hours ago.
I mean, I was gone for less than 24 hours, and it's just like Armageddon at home. But then several days before I went to that black tie gala, I was embedded in a little town in Colorado, and I was observing 3 generations of women at a psilocybin retreat. They were all drinking psilocybin tea and off on another planet. And so I feel like the word or the term mashup is synonymous with my life and has been for the last more than a decade.
I feel like you are a living embodiment of mashiness and mashups in so many ways. One thing we wanted to ask a little bit about at the start before we get into like current life is to give us a little of your life, like growing up life. So you grew up in Sacramento, is that right?
I grew up in a little suburb of Sacramento called Carmichael, California.
Oh my God.
And
what a name.
Carmichael, yes.
Carmichael.
When I was growing up, it was otherwise known as White Michael because it was such a non-diverse community. There were so few Asian families.
How did your family end up in White Michael?
Well, it's interesting because my grandparents came to America in the late 1940s, and they both happened to speak perfect English. My grandfather was educated in the United States, got his MBA in the United States. My grandmother studied in England, and they came here with high-level degrees, but they couldn't get hired to work in finance and so on. So they ended up living in a converted chicken coop and eventually salvaging enough money to open a Chinese restaurant. And because they spoke such good English, they were able to move away from the predominantly Chinese community in Sacramento to Carmichael, to White Michael, and open the first Chinese restaurant ever there. So that's how I ended up in Carmichael.
So you grew up in White Michael, and then your parents, are both of your parents Chinese American?
My mother is Taiwanese American,
and
my father is Chinese American. Yes. These days, it's very, very important for me to make that distinction. Actually, not these days. I have made that distinction for a long time. But because there were so few Asians growing up, I really didn't know much about my Taiwanese identity either. It was just so much easier to say Chinese. I was already different because I was Chinese. So to have to explain that Taiwan was a different country at the time was just too much for a little girl to be able to handle.
Were the grandparents who opened the restaurant your paternal or maternal grandparents?
Paternal. So those were my Cantonese, Chinese, American grandparents. My Taiwanese grandmother, my mom's mom, she didn't speak any English. So both my grandparents passed away when I was in my early 20s. And people always ask me, like, what's your greatest wish? What's your biggest wish? And my wish would be to have one more day with both of my grandmas because they were so special and important to me. And there's so many things I want to ask them, but particularly my Taiwanese grandmother, because we couldn't speak to each other. There's just so much about her life that I will never know.
I also think that's a thing about grandparents, those of us who are lucky to actually have gotten to spend any time. You're very lucky if while you're developing as a young person and they're declining as an older person, that there's a moment where you're at a place where you are open or able to engage really beautifully with them and they're still lucid and engaged, because then you could have intimacy, which is not always the case, right, with somebody older.
Well, so my mother and my husband's mother became grandparents to my kids very, very late. I have a 7-year-old and my husband's mother is 91. And she loves the fact that she has these young grandchildren who can come over and they want to be there, because she says most of her friends have grandkids who are all grown up and they just don't have time to spend a lot of time with her.
Or they would be great-grandkids at this point, and there's
91.
too many layers. Right.
Exactly. But on the other hand, I don't know how much time she has left on the earth. I mean, she's 91 and she's been having some health challenges. And so the notion that my kids won't get to spend significant amounts of time with her makes me so, so sad. And so therefore, both my mom and my mother-in-law are at our home because they live a couple blocks away from us almost every single night.
We have many questions.
There is a lot of food that's cooked every single night. There is a lot of advice being doled out to Paul and me every single night. And it's highly overwhelming every single night, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yep.
Paul once said, "Is it too much?" It's like the advice will not stop coming. It's not even advice. It's like they don't directly say, like, "Why are you feeding them this?" It's sort of like, like these sounds.
Can you do a difference? Is there like Korean mother-in-law versus
the guttural? It's the more
Korean is definitely more guttural, as Amy can attest to.
I'm very familiar with that sound.
I wasn't even doing it justice. It's more like it's like this deep, like nasal, throaty, guttural.
There's some mucus moving around.
Yes.
Joe Coy actually has a great interpretation, is that an older Korean person always sounds like they're stoned when they're talking to you. Judgy and stoned. Ugh.
It's like, yeah, nah, nah,
Oh my God. There's something that, we have been discussing a lot, and this has been kind of thematic over the year, but it has been coming up in a lot of these conversations as we think about what it means to build a good life, about the stories that we tell ourselves and the narratives that we build, and whether or not they're true, right? And like how stories get interpreted through generations. And so it's really something magical that your girls are young, but they're not so young that they're going to have to rely on your story of your mother or Paul's story of his mother, right? They're going to be able to have living stories themselves that they have created with each of those people that they can carry for the rest of their lives. It's like so magical that you're creating this for them. Because I think that with a lot of mashup families, because of language divides, because of literal physical divides, I mean, now it's so much easier because, like, I'm 43?
No, 44.
No, I'm 44. Me growing up, it wasn't like I could FaceTime a cousin in Korea.
Yeah.
That was just like not a reality. So if you were not with your family.
No, you would call, if you ever talked on the phone, it'd be like, you have to just say hello to your grandma and then hang up for us because it was so expensive.
It'd be $22.
Yeah.
So I totally appreciate that you have just been like, maybe this is madness, but this is our madness, and you're giving your daughters this gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they are still very young. I mean, my daughters are 10 and 7, so they will have those memories.
Yes.
But, they'll be just shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll be a little more limited. But nevertheless, it's so, so important for me to allow them to just have some.
I always find it amazing as somebody who does not live close to their parents. And my sister, who I'm very, very close to, lives on, it's silly. In New York City, it's a mile and a half, but she may as well live on the other side of the world because she's in Manhattan and I'm in Brooklyn, is that, like, are there invitations extended? Do you make a plan with either of the moms, or are they just present?
They have keys to the house. They're in the house before we even get there sometimes. No invitations are extended.
No.
They're just it's our domain is their domain.
I will say, as a person in a couple where it's just my family who's over all the time, I really appreciate that my husband's just like, yeah, they just walk. Like the gate opens to the side of the house, and there's just like always some member of my family, brothers, parents, whoever, maybe even a cousin. And but you both, that's kind of nice. There's equal opportunity invasion which I kind of love.
Oh, it gets better. It's not just the grandmas who are in our house. My husband's sister lives in our house.
Hi.
Hi. And my cousin, Dorothy, she, when I travel or have to work, she sometimes comes and stays in the house as well. So it's really sad for Paul. And we have a female dog because Paul has just been estrogened out.
That's why he has to do all these trips. He's like, I got to go escape these people.
He's got to go hang out with the dudes.
Yeah.
But so it's not just the grandmothers. They are the loudest, but the house is always full of people. And my sister-in-law, who I absolutely adore, she doesn't have kids and has a very successful career and a beautiful house, not far from us. But she was recovering from a heart condition, a heart operation a number of years ago, and came to recover at our home. And my kids they love her so much. She's my kid's godmother. And she plays with them. I am not a good player, but she does arts and crafts with them. She will bake with them anytime they want. She plays and plays. And so after she recovered from her surgery, my husband and I were like, will you please just stay here? Rent your house out. Please stay here. And so it's been great. When my kids wake up in the morning at 5, they know not to come into our room anymore. They go straight into Coco's room. And the name Coco is really cute because auntie in Chinese is gugu. And in Korean, it's Como. And so they kind of combined it and call her Coco.
Oh, that's a great mashup.
It's a great mashup.
I love it so much.
But she is known by everyone now as Coco, which is a combination of Chinese, Korean,
Oh, that is the cutest.
Ideas.
So it's like, seems like there's also a lot of intention, even to say to Paul, you know what, there's not that much time. So let's just make the most of this chaos while it's here.
Well, also, our culture in America just doesn't value our seniors. And it was inadvertent that our lives kind of ended up this way. But when you think about how people in Asia live, they often do live with they have multi-generational homes. And while I never thought that I would live that way because I grew up in America.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's chaotic and loud, but it's so beautiful. I love having so much family in my kids' lives and in my life.
Yeah.
All the time.
I actually have a question for you about, as you've been in therapy and you've mined a lot of your thoughts about yourself and how you exist in the world, and your husband is doing similarly. With these wonderful ladies in your home who may or may not be the cause of some of those things, when they're with your children, are there moments where you're like, I am extremely triggered by this right now? Like when they're like, say something to although they're different with the kids, with grandkids, but like, are you ever like, this is why I have to go to my bedroom because this mother's saying something?
Yes. So Paul and I, though, our lives were obviously different and we are of different cultures, we had some similarities in our upbringing. My parents were divorced when I was 7, and my mom moved to Los Angeles, and so she was not in the house most days because she was geographically quite distant from me, and my dad worked all the time. So it was my grandma who was in my house who was taking care of my sister and me. And
this is the British educated one.
Yes, yes. And Paul's parents, they worked all the time. And he was an athlete, and he played every sport. And
he's just, readers, he's very tall and handsome.
He's very tall.
Strapping.
Yes, and he's
if you want to know if Lisa Ling's husband occasionally posts a thirst trap on Instagram, the answer is yes.
Yes. But we thirsted. I don't know what we reacted.
Respectfully. Very respectfully.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's a cute guy. He's a tall drink of lemonade. So neither of our parents were around, I think, as much as we would have liked. And so they're so opinionated about how we are raising our kids.
Oh, yeah.
And neither of them are shy about divulging what they think we should be doing.
Never.
In raising our kids. And so there's so many times when Paul and I are just like, why didn't you do that when we were kids? And so that's really hard sometimes. And we've gotten into some big fights with each other, with them. And, we've both stormed out of the room, or we've just become apoplectic. So yes.
Oh, and Paul's also, he's got 50% Korean rage. So it's just like, it's embedded in there.
I would say it's 75%. Right?
Oh, 75%. We're inching closer to the boiling point.
Well, and particularly when it comes to things that may have a direct relationship with his upbringing, because when you're a young kid and you harbor those feelings of abandonment or rejection or whatever, and it continues to go unresolved for your whole life, it can manifest itself in very negative ways. And I think this is particularly applicable in Asian communities where there isn't as much communication or affection. It's really hard. So I think that's one of the reasons why it really frustrates him even more than it frustrates me. And it frustrates me.
This is so... Wow, Lisa. This is the past 10 years of therapy, just like doing, 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 bubbling. I will say, so my older sister, who basically raised me because I had a very similar situation where grandmothers would kind of pop in and out of our lives from Korea and like kind of rotate around the cousins' houses taking care of us when there was like the most need. But my sister, who's 6 years older, by the time she was like 12, was responsible for me. She's exactly your age. She just turned 50 this summer. And I think for both of us, I watched her go through this huge exploration, which I have learned that Paul has done as well. But it's almost like you don't even know, and I'll speak for her and me, is that you don't even know what you thought you needed or that you missed until you have children of your own. And then you're like, oh, fuck, what are these feelings? Why do I feel this rage? What is happening here? And this act of like kind of reparenting yourself, and then while also trying to learn how to be the kind of parent you want to be to your kids is wild. And I just feel like that act of being like, oh, this is actually what I want, or this is what I need, and how I want my family to be. But oh shit, I have so much healing to do because there's still like a little kid inside of me that didn't get the things that I now am seeing that I missed or that I wanted.
Well, this is why it's so important, and I'm so glad that we are having so many open discussions about generational trauma. Because I think it's easy for us as parents to, and because we're still harboring so much of that resentment about what we didn't get.
Because we're still people, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in some ways, we're still stunted as children. Because we didn't get those things that we really needed, and it didn't resolve. It sort of festers for so long. And so Paul and I have done a lot of healing over the years, and we've both come to a place where we don't just think about the issues of abandonment and the lack of affection that we experienced from our own parents ourselves. We think about, and I'm going to get very emotional here, like how much our own parents needed that. Yeah. And I think the reason why they were unable to show it to us is because either it wasn't part of their culture or they didn't have models for it themselves.
Yes.
And so over the years, Paul and I have, where we had these resentments for our parents, what they weren't able to provide for us, we have both transformed and really started thinking about trying to offer that kind of affection to our parents because we know that they didn't have it either.
Oh, Lisa.
And in some ways, we are we are becoming the teachers that even I think our parents still need, and it's really made our relationship with our parents and our family just so much deeper. Plant medicines have helped. I'll be honest with you.
I'm crying. I am so in awe, Lisa. Here I am, I'm like wiping tears.
Yes.
I'm going to try not to snot all over my microphone. But I just think that level of curiosity and compassion is what I feel like I've been trying to get to for a long time. And it's so
hard.
nice to see that you got there.
It is really hard because so many of us have these deep scars. And it's impossible to think about our own parents, not as our parents, but as a similarly stunted child.
Yeah.
Right? Who didn't get what they needed from their parents. And when you really stop and think about it, our parents didn't just have parents that weren't able to show affection. They went through wars.
Yes.
Yeah.
They went through poverty.
Yeah. Yes.
They went through and experienced things that in our wildest dreams we can't even imagine. And so that's another layer of trauma and closed offness that they are harboring inside of them. And so, and again, plant medicines really helped us see this, that we all need healing, and that the resentment directed toward our parents is sometimes really misplaced because it's not their fault. It's not their parents' fault, right? It's this trauma that has lived with us intergenerationally that we can't pinpoint. But it makes sense that, if you don't have a model for how to do it, how would you ever know how to do it?
Also, how could you process so much of the stuff that they experienced? There's no processing the wars or or like, oh, all my aunts were murdered. Like, how are you supposed to you have to compartmentalize that stuff.
You have to shut down
in order to keep living.
And they're doing that, and they do that to try and protect their kids.
Yep.
I came to this country because I want to give my kids and future generations a better life.
Right.
But I could never talk about it because I don't want to think about it because it'll take me to a dark place. I'll go into a deep depression. Right. But I also don't want to burden my kids with this trauma that I'm still holding.
I also think there's just so much loneliness. I've sort of observed this in the immigrant generation is, I think, this makes me really sad, but I think they feel really alone in this world. Because in order to make their lives work or had made it possible for our lives, there's a sense of being so self-reliant and then distrust of anyone else being able to get shit done. And I think that's a very just so painful.
Well, it's so multifaceted because that generation, their eyes have seen so much, right?
Yeah.
And you can bury it, but you can't pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yep.
And sometimes it manifests itself in ugly or angry ways.
Yep.
On top of the fact that there's a lot of pride in Asian communities, but so many immigrant communities. There's a whole concept of saving face.
Yeah.
And so the idea that you are not maintaining a certain life. I think that's one of the reasons why Asian culture is just is so materialistic.
Oh my God, we just had this conversation.
It's a way to show what I've earned and where I've come. And it's
validate all the things that you have sacrificed.
Yeah.
In your Fendi bag.
Absolutely.
Well, here's a tactical question. You've done so much work and so much healing and created so much compassion and empathy in your home. Did either of you talk to your moms about it? Was this a conversation that was had in that direction? Or was it just kind of an acceptance and a reforming of family bonds?
Oh, no. We've talked to our parents. And in fact, we talk a lot now. And in the case of my mom, who left it when I was 7, my sister was 4. It's like I grew up thinking, like, how do you leave kids when you're that age? And I was with my dad and my grandma, and we were in a stable community, and my mom was not stable at the time, and I had that resentment. I was holding that resentment for so many years until I had a plant experience. And
My God,
rather
Lisa.
than going back to my childhood, it's going to sound a little esoteric, but I have to talk about it because it was so profound. Rather than
Yes.
going back to any episodes in my own childhood, I went back to my mother's childhood. I relived aspects
wow.
of her childhood. And they were so hard, and they were so dark and so sad that the next day I came home from that experience. I went to my mom's house and I held her like she was a child. And I told her that I will take care of her, because nobody had ever told her that in her entire life. My mom and so many immigrants, they're just they're just hustling. They're just hustling. They're just trying to survive.
Everyone just wants to be taken care of, actually.
Yes, yes.
Now you have a child the age that your mom left, right?
Yeah.
Are you, when you look at your baby, well, you've had 2 go through that, right? So the youngest one is that age. Oh, I guess they're probably the same distance that you and
my
Laura
sister,
are,
yeah.
right? So when your elder was 7 and your younger was 4, what happened in that moment for you? Was there an awareness of, oh, this is a Rubicon we're crossing? What was bubbling up for you when your kids were suddenly the age when your mom did?
Dude.
You don't have to go there.
Well, let's just say, when you're one of the few Asian kids in an all-white community, kind of upwardly mobile community, but you don't have, you're pretty lower middle class, you just want to pretend that everything's fine and that it's all good.
Yeah. Yep.
And, when you're the only kid whose mom isn't at the parent-teacher conferences or at any of my activities, you just become good at painting a picture.
Yeah.
Oh, she's at a work thing, or she's not able to make it. Meanwhile, she's living in another city, you know? But what I came to realize, I was hiding so much as a kid, is that we all hide so much from other kids. Some of the kids that I went to high school with, who I thought had everything, the perfect lives, the perfect homes, the perfect cars. Later on, when I would catch up with them and they would tell me, like, my dad was cheating on my mom, or, my mom was an alcoholic, or I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I thought you had the perfect life. And I that has really allowed me to feel so much more compassion for human beings.
Totally.
And
also, you have no fucking idea.
No idea.
Especially when you're going through things. In my life, there's been, let's just say, some like acute trauma moments where, like, let's say somebody died, like, and then you have to go get something, like, because you're a human being who's still alive, like, go to the grocery store, and it's the fog of that, and you're just watching other people shopping whom probably didn't have somebody die hours before, and you're like, wow. Whenever I'm shopping on a normal day, I have no idea who else in this store, who working at this store, who, anybody, what is happening in their lives right now. I have no idea. And if I can have that, give people grace or have that compassion in the world, just give, not, you can say no to assholes while still giving like a little more of a buffer for grace, because there probably is somebody walking in the grocery store who is dealing with that.
Yeah. And Rebecca, that's one of the reasons why, in my work as a journalist, it's been so important for me to highlight people or communities that you may think one thing of, but really never taken the time to understand or get to know. And so often because we've covered so many marginalized communities or communities that might be considered sort of outsiders. So often, so many people talk about these moments in childhood when something happened, some kind of trauma or some, abandonment or some fight or something that happened that just never really resolved itself. And that kind of sent them off onto a path that was unfamiliar. And it makes me just think about how important it is to try and encourage each other to try and look, to go deep, as hard as it is. And so, fortunately, we are living in a time when there's an elevated consciousness about this, about dislodging those deeply held traumas that so many of us are carrying from childhood and bringing them to the fore, no matter how difficult it is, and trying to finally find some resolution and healing.
What if I was like, I'm so traumatized by people's Instagram comments? It's like, the misuse of trauma.
Totally.
Also, it's
my God.
such a funny, you're like, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
That ain't it,
Yeah,
lady.
exactly.
I just think that there is something also, and another kind of ongoing theme is just reminding ourselves, because Americans are often convinced that we invented the thing or that this is a new experience. And I think what you're talking about here, especially in relationship to intergenerational families and how to bring families closer, it's just, this is where I bring up the Joy Luck Club. Sorry to be the middle-aged
Best
Asian
movie
lady
ever.
who does this. Best movie ever. But, that idea of stairs, that I'm a step and my children are part of my staircase, and so are my mothers and their mothers and their mothers and their mothers. And just remembering that we are bound to all of those generations, forward and back, and we can decide how we want to reshape it, but that does not mean that we can exist separate. And I think that's a very not American idea, or something that we reject so thoroughly that it actually does so much damage to us, because we're constantly thinking we can just reinvent ourselves. And like we can, and we don't reinvent ourselves from a blank slate.
Absolutely.
This is something, though, on a sort of lighter note. And I say this as the only non-Chinese or Korean person
about
here.
Sort of lighter.
Sort of lighter. Okay,
This has been light. This is every day.
We have actually had, speaking of Chinese Koreans, Awkwafina on our show several times, and her grandmother actually giving some dating advice. And we've asked many people in our community over these last many years, 10 years of the Master of Americans, what dating advice did you get from your immigrant parents? And most of it's racist, but and this is racist but positive, is that Korean parents, mothers always say, marry a Chinese man because he'll cook for you. And so I wanted to explore that here. You did the reverse. And how do you feel about that advice? Do you feel that that's resonant?
Well, I probably didn't have that experience because I am the woman who married a Korean man. Because
well, that's because all the Korean women married the Chinese men. There had to be, you're like, I scored.
Well, I have so many Korean girlfriends. Most of my closest friends are Korean women. And they would tell me that they wanted to marry Chinese men because they took care of the women. And they told me not to date Korean men, because I've always been, I don't know why, attracted to Korean men.
Because they're hot.
Because they're hot and they have a lot of swagger. That's why.
Yes. So I, ended up with this guy. And when his mom found out that I don't cook at all, again, she didn't actually say anything. It was just like, oh, you don't cook? No, I don't know how to cook at all. It was It was like that, I'm trying to get as low as she. She was not happy that nobody was going to cook for her son. Because in the beginning of our relationship, she would even call me. And I would answer hello, and she'd go, "How is he?" Rather than "How are you?" What's been going on? It was just, "How is he?"
Oh my God, my face is hurting from smiling.
Because the first son in Korean culture is, he's the falcon of the family. He's the one on whom one should dote and take care and so on. So initially it was a little bit disconcerting, but I couldn't lie and tell her I cooked when I don't, I burn scrambled eggs. So I think she was somewhat displeased by that, especially because when I first met her, and my mother-in-law has a very strong personality and is very opinionated.
I don't want you to know that there was a question in our notes, which was, how do you live with your Korean mother-in-law? I didn't write that. Amy did.
I
Just
wrote
for
that.
context
I wrote that.
of, yeah.
And for the record, I don't live with it. I have a Mexican mother-in-law, and that's enough.
Right.
And she's far away, and she's 1,000 miles away. Okay, go on.
Right.
So the first time I met his mom, he invited me to a family gathering. And, I was feeling a little, it was my first time. It's a house full of people. And Korean people, all Korean people. And
who, it turns out, both Lisa and I love Korean people.
Love.
Turns out.
Love. And I'm like, all my friends are Korean. I got this.
Yeah. You're like, yo paseo.
Yeah. I had my whole, about, the first thing that my future mother-in-law said to me, she didn't smile. She took my hand and she said, "Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?"
Oh, she's that.
I knew that. I knew it was coming.
Oh, wow.
And I am rarely at a total loss for words. I mean, even in uncomfortable situations, I usually have a retort. I found myself just completely speechless. My mouth was dry. I'm like, oh my God. What am I going to say?
God, Korean people are so intense.
Did she put Bibles in your house everywhere in every drawer?
No. She gave me one later on. But anyway, so my response was, I grew up going to church.
Oh.
Yes, I used to go to church every Sunday. And then I just kind of left it at that. And of course I was met with, again. I got used to that sound, and I'm not even doing it justice.
No.
So that's kind of how my relationship with my mother-in-law kind of started off.
But you gave her grandkids.
Well, I did, but mind you, all my close Korean girlfriends warned me about the Korean mother-in-law. I mean, they warned me, incessantly, oh my God, you sure you want to do this? You're going to get a Korean mother-in-law. And, look, I'm a journalist. I can embed in, any kind of community. Yeah. And so for me, it was I'm okay. I can win people over. It's what I do. And I'm a kind person. And so when I was met with that first question, I was like, oh, shit.
You're like, I didn't know
this is real.
This is the warfare. Yes. I was not prepared for this.
Yes, and then followed by the after she found out I couldn't cook for her son. That was just oh my God, is this real? Is what my girlfriends, is what what Alice and Shin and Cindy were telling me, is that real? And it was real.
Well, so what are what would you say are the rules of engagement in your Chinese Korean house and marriage? Because it feels like there's a lot of levels here.
I mean, I do think that if I were Korean, my relationship with my mother-in-law might be different. I think there are things about language that I just don't understand that may have been more present had I been Korean. And I know that, she and her husband would have loved for Paul to marry a Korean girl, just like my parents would have loved for me to, marry someone who's Chinese. But I will say that while I was initially spooked, and again, because my mother-in-law also just has a very strong personality, and at the time she was sort of incapable of not offering me suggestions and, just divulging her opinion, she has become one of my best friends. And I respect her so much. I respect her journey. I respect, the life lessons that she bequeaths to me and to my kids. And she's such an amazing person who has accomplished so much. And I love her. And even though I don't believe what she believes, I happen to have a pretty impressive biblical repertoire. And so, when she comes at me with something
Bible
that she
verse.
thinks is biblical, I have a retort very often because I'm familiar with much of the Bible. And I think she respects that I at least have the knowledge. It isn't a decision that I've arrived at erroneously, and that I am a very spiritual person and that God is a very important person in my life. I just have a different path to God. I believe that people do have different paths other than, that one path. I mean, it's still, religion is still somewhat touchy in the household, but there is such a deep respect for the human and even the faith because her faith has gotten her through so much. And so I really respect that relationship that she has, with her faith. I mean, I truly love her. And, I don't just consider her my mother-in-law. I really do consider her my friend. And I, call her about things. I ask her advice. And
What do you call her? Not on the phone, but like what name do you call her?
Well, I mean, before I had kids, I would call her mom. But since having kids, they shortened, you say halmoni, you call a Korean grandma halmoni, but they call her Hami for short. And so we all just call her Hami. Everyone just calls her Hami.
I love Hami and Coco.
I know. We have these little
really
little pet names.
It's so cute.
It's so mashup.
That's so great. Okay, I have two final questions to wrap up. Okay, so one of the great entry points into all of our lives, I think, of getting to know each other, and we think about this all the time, is just a gateway to everything is food, right?
Yes.
One of our big questions, not a question, it was just it was a statement that was in our notes, was Chinese versus Korean.
Oh.
Go. And I'm going to say Korean wins here.
Oh, for sure.
Not that it has to be a competition.
As far as preference is concerned, I will always choose Korean food over Chinese because my body just craves like fermented stuff. And I love the flavor of kimchi everything. And like kimchi jjigae is like my favorite thing. I dream about it. But Paul, who is Korean American, will always choose Chinese food.
Oh, wow.
Wow, this is just a very interesting thing we have going on here.
I did have some delicious naengmyeon last night. I was like, I have a tummy ache. I'd like some cold noodles.
It's my kid's favorite. In fact, both my kids, growing up, I hated, smelling like Chinese food. I never wanted to eat Chinese food. I just wanted McDonald's and spaghetti. But my kids both always want Asian food. They have a preference for Korean food, but they like Chinese food too. But they insist on taking Asian food to school. And so, they're proud of every aspect of their Asianness.
Oh my God, wait. I had a dream about your daughter, Amy.
My daughter.
In relation to exactly this, which was we were explaining like how different and wonderful it is. Just be like, that's 30 years of people making this possible for you to then just feel like fucking proud. Like there's no noise about any of it. And no like to even be like, wait, you were worried about that, Mom? Like that, it's so brilliant and cool.
Yeah, like that seems wild. Wow, I have damp tissues just at my feet right now in my booth. But I think my final question, and I know this is Rebecca's as well, whenever we are in the presence of greatness, just you are a woman who has done so much with your life and your career and your personal life and gone through so many transformations. You're a hugely successful mother of two young kids who are exactly the same age as my kids, actually, 10 and 7. And Rebecca's has
7
two
and
kids
4.
right up on the way. Is just... Can you leave us with any tips as to just fucking how? Like how? How are we supposed to how does it all work? Because,
and just for context, I did have to go to an urgent care yesterday for something that was probably a panic attack.
Stress-related panic attack. And it's just, we watch you navigate this world. We know it's not easy, and we have worked with you. We have gotten to know you, and it's just been so, so great. And we want to know how you do it so that we can do it too.
Well, if for some reason I have conveyed to people that I know how to do it, then I have really fooled a lot of people because, oh my God, it is so hard.
Yeah.
It is so, so hard. And that's why I will continue to fight for moms and, advocate for moms because it is so hard. I'm very lucky that I have a spouse that will do a lot of things that many male spouses refuse to do. I'm very, very lucky. And it's still hard, And so to those moms who are shouldering everything, my respect knows no bounds. And I mean, the only thing I would say is, don't be afraid to ask for help because I think we in our culture, when someone calls us a super mom, we kind of wear that as a badge of pride, when those are impossible expectations to uphold. They're just impossible. And I would like us to just allow ourselves to be vulnerable and just say that I'm going fucking bananas, and that
Totally.
and I need help. And, every single day it's a constant Lisa, you need to get your shit together today because it's chaos all the time. And we are, no matter how supportive our husbands or our spouses, if we have them we are still the ones who are maintaining all the schedules in our heads and making sure that, this person is there and this, and all that stuff. But just just give yourself a break and don't think you need to do it all and don't be afraid to ask for help.
I think the asking for help, which is a great way to wrap this idea of what we're talking about, an intergenerational home, and also some of the stuff that we come up against as mashups, as first generation and as women, and then in the context of America, this sense of self-reliance, which you can't rely just on yourself in the world. And I think I'm not that good at asking for help. I'm very good at providing help. Yeah. But I think that it's a good reminder.
And it's okay when you borrow things from other cultures. Ours isn't the only way,
No.
It shouldn't be considered to be taboo or whatever.
Yes.
In some parts of the world, they actually do things better.
What? Oh my God.
How dare you, Lisa
Ling.
Lisa, we love you. Thank you so much for being here. This was
guys,
so
love you too.
So great.
So fun. And now I need to go into therapy again.
No.
Although that was so good. That was so good.
Wow, the way that the entire floor of my booth was just like a foot-high puddle of snotty tissues at the end of that conversation.
She was surprised. Lisa was surprised. Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway, so was I. So was I is what I'm going to say. And I'm just so grateful that she shared her story because I think I'm turning a new leaf. I mean, maybe next year for me, it's Judaism and a lot of psilocybin. What do you think? Do you think it goes together?
Absolutely. Ram Dass was a Jew.
Love this for all of us. Next week, we'll be joined by our old pal, Rainn Wilson. Maybe it surprises you that he's our old pal, but he'll be coming to chat with us about all things spiritual and how to find your spiritual path in a world that sometimes feels like basura. You will not be surprised to learn that we laugh a lot too.
Make sure to catch the rest of the Ultimate Guide to a Mashup Life every week this fall, and and follow the Mashup Americans wherever you get your pods. And tell your friends! And if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, do it. mashupamericans.com/subscribe. Love you!
Bye! This podcast is a production of the Mashup Americans. It is executive produced by Amy S. Choi and Rebecca Lair. Senior editor and producer is Sarah Pellegrini. Production manager is Shelby Sandlin. Thanks to DJ Rob Swift for our theme song, Salsa Scratch. Additional engineering support by Pedro Rafael Rosado. Please make sure to follow and share this show with your friends. Bye!